The bakery smelled of vanilla and fresh bread, but for Lila Moreno, the sweetness of the air couldn't mask the bitterness tightening her chest. She wiped the sweat from her brow, glancing at the cracked phone on the counter. Another missed call from the hospital. Her mother's condition was worsening, and the unpaid bills had reached a number she couldn't even whisper aloud. When the shop's bell rang, Lila expected a customer. Instead, two tall men in black suits entered, faces sharp, movements precise. Their presence silenced the room. The older one stepped forward, placing a letter on the counter. "Miss Moreno," he said flatly, "this is regarding your late father's debt to the Valente family. Payment is due, in full, within 7 days." Lila froze. "My father died 3 years ago. I don't know what you're talking about." The man smirked. "Then you'd better start remembering. The boss doesn't forget what he's owed." Her hands trembled as she tore open the envelope. Numbers, impossible numbers, stared back at her. Enough to buy a house. Enough to destroy her life. That night, Lila sat beside her mother's hospital bed, trying to hide her tears. The machines beeped softly, a cruel reminder of how fragile everything was. She wanted to scream at her father for leaving this mess, at fate for being so merciless. But mostly she was afraid. The next morning, a black car appeared outside her small apartment. A man stepped out and handed her a card embossed in gold. Dante Valente, Valente Enterprises. Everyone in town knew the name, the ruthless mafia boss who ruled the city's underground with an iron fist. Rumors said he burned down entire businesses for debts smaller than hers. Lila's heart pounded as she stared at the address on the card. She didn't know what she would say, but she knew one thing for sure. If she didn't face him, her mother wouldn't survive the week. As the sun set behind the city skyline, Lila locked the bakery door for what might be the last time and whispered, "Please, God, let him listen." Then, with fear burning in her chest and love guiding her steps, she went to meet the devil himself. The Valente estate loomed over the city like a fortress, iron gates, marble steps, and guards who didn't bother to hide their guns. Lila's hands shook as she clutched her worn purse, the letter of debt inside feeling heavier than stone. When the gates opened, she was escorted through hallways lined with portraits of power and blood. Every footstep echoed her fear. Finally, the guards stopped before massive double doors. "He's waiting," the man muttered before leaving her alone. Lila took a shaky breath and pushed the doors open. Behind a mahogany desk sat Dante Valente, the man everyone feared to even mention. Dark suit, darker eyes, expression unreadable. His presence filled the room like thunder before a storm. "So," he said without looking up from his papers, "the debtor's daughter finally appears." Lila swallowed hard. "Please, Mr. Valente. I'll find a way to repay the money. Just give me time." Dante leaned back, finally meeting her eyes. Something flickered there, recognition maybe, but it vanished before she could be sure. "Time?" he repeated quietly, almost amused. "Your father had time. Now his debt belongs to you." Her voice trembled. "My mother is sick. I'll do anything, to keep her alive." He rose from his chair and walked toward her, slow and deliberate. Lila felt her breath catch. He stopped inches away, his cologne sharp and intoxicating. "Anything?" he murmured. She nodded, too afraid to speak. Dante studied her face, those trembling lips, those defiant eyes. For a brief second, his jaw tightened as if restraining something unspoken. Then his tone hardened again. "Marry me," he said. Lila froze. "What?" "I'll erase your mother's debt. In exchange you'll be my wife. On paper. In public. No questions, no interference. You'll stay in my house and follow my rules." She stared at him, disbelief giving way to anger. "You can't be serious." "I never joke about business," he said coolly, turning back to his desk. "You have 3 days to decide. After that, the debt will be collected, by any means necessary." As she stumbled out of the room, heart pounding, Dante watched her leave with eyes that softened for the briefest moment. "She still doesn't remember me," he whispered. 3 days passed like a blur of fear and sleepless nights. Lila tried everything, pleading with the hospital, selling the bakery's equipment, begging for loans, but no one dared to help once they heard the Valente name. On the 4th morning, she stood before a mirror in a white lace dress that wasn't hers. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. The reflection staring back at her didn't look like a bride, it looked like a prisoner preparing for her sentence. The ceremony was private, attended only by Dante's inner circle. No music, no laughter, no love. Just silence thick enough to suffocate. Dante stood tall beside her, expression carved in stone. When the priest asked if he took her as his wife, his voice was low and certain. I do. Lila's turn came and her lips barely moved. I do. He slipped the ring onto her finger, cold metal that felt like a chain, and for a moment his thumb brushed her skin. A spark she didn't expect shot through her and she quickly looked away. When the ceremony ended, Dante offered his arm, his tone polite but distant. Mrs. Valente. 2 words that changed her fate forever. At the mansion, Dante led her to a grand suite overlooking the dark city. This will be your room, he said. Mine is down the hall. We will keep up appearances when necessary, but otherwise, you'll stay out of my affairs. Lila's heart pounded. So that's it? You buy my hand and lock me away? His eyes flashed with something sharp. You agreed to this, Miss Moreno? Don't pretend you didn't know what you were selling. Her breath caught at his cruel tone. I didn't sell anything. I saved my mother. He turned to leave, pausing at the door. Then be grateful she's still alive. When the door closed behind him, Lila sank to the bed, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. She thought she'd sold her freedom to a man without a heart. But somewhere down the hall, Dante stood in silence, hand pressed to his chest as if the sound of her crying pierced through his armor. She still cries the same way, he murmured, his voice breaking. Days blurred into quiet routines inside the Valente mansion, a palace of marble and shadows. Lila wandered its endless halls, surrounded by luxury that felt more like a cage. The maids avoided her eyes. The guards followed her every step. At meals, Dante sat at the head of the long dining table, reading documents while she ate in silence. He rarely spoke except to ask if she needed anything. His voice was polite, controlled, too controlled, like a man afraid to feel. One evening Lila worked up the courage to speak. Why me? Out of all the women in this city, why force me into this? Dante didn't look up from his glass of wine. Because you asked for mercy and I needed a wife. Simple exchange. His indifference stung more than his words. You could have just destroyed us. That's what everyone says you do. He glanced at her then, eyes dark and unreadable. You believe everything people say about me? I believe what I see, she said softly. Something flickered in his expression, a crack in the ice. Then look closer, he murmured before rising and leaving the room. That night, as rain beat against the windows, Lila heard voices downstairs. She crept to the staircase and saw Camilla, a stunning woman with fiery red lips, standing too close to Dante. She doesn't belong here, Dante, Camilla said, tracing a finger along his sleeve. You married her out of pity, not love. You don't owe her anything. Dante's tone was calm, but his jaw tightened. Leave her out of this. Camilla's smirk turned cruel. You can protect her for now, but she'll never survive in your world. Lila slipped back upstairs before they noticed her, heart aching at the truth in those words. Later, she returned to her room to find a blanket folded neatly on her bed. It hadn't been there before. A quiet act of care, no note, no explanation. She touched the fabric, whispering, Why do you hide kindness behind cruelty? Down the hall, Dante stood in the dark watching her door. He didn't have the courage to answer the same question. A week into her gilded captivity, Lila began to explore the forbidden parts of the mansion. She needed distraction, from the loneliness, from Dante's silence, from the ache in her chest that grew every time his eyes lingered on her for a moment too long. One afternoon, while dusting the library shelves, she found an old wooden box tucked behind a row of books. Inside were faded photographs, letters, and a child's drawing. Her breath caught as she lifted one photo, a smiling young girl handing a loaf of bread to a scruffy boy on a city street. The boy's dark eyes were unmistakable. Dante. Her heart raced. How could he have a photo of her from childhood? When Dante entered the library moments later, her hands were still trembling, the photo clutched to her chest. What is this, Dante? She demanded. Why do you have a picture of me? His gaze darkened instantly. Who told you to touch that box? I wasn't snooping, she said, voice cracking. Just tell me the truth. Did you know me before all this? His jaw clenched, muscles ticking beneath his perfect control. It doesn't matter. The past is dead. She stepped closer, anger overtaking fear. You're lying. You knew exactly who I was when you forced me to marry you. Why? Dante turned away, pacing like a predator trapped in his own cage. Because I owed you more than I could ever repay, he muttered under his breath. What do you mean? She whispered, but he was already walking toward the door. Stay out of my past, Lila, he said coldly. You won't like what you find there. The door slammed, leaving her alone with the photo still trembling in her hand. Later that night, Camilla appeared outside her door, a poisonous smile curving her lips. "Poor thing," she purred. "Still trying to understand him? Don't bother. Dante doesn't love, he destroys. He's using you to erase his guilt, nothing more." Lila said nothing, but the seed of doubt began to root deep in her heart. As thunder rolled outside, she stared at the photo again. The boy's eyes, once full of warmth, now belonged to a man who'd built his empire on pain. And she couldn't tell which version of him was real. The mansion's tension grew thicker with each passing day. Dante became more distant, burying himself in business calls and late-night meetings. Lila could feel him pulling away, yet every glance he stole when he thought she wasn't looking told another story, one of torment and restraint. Then one night, chaos shattered the silence. Gunfire erupted outside the estate. Lila, startled awake, ran to the hallway only to be dragged back by a guard. "Stay in your room," he barked, locking the door behind her. But through the window she saw black SUVs and men in masks storming the gates. Her heart pounded. Dante. Ignoring fear, she slipped through the balcony doors and climbed down the ivy lattice. Rain poured as she ran toward the courtyard, just in time to see Dante surrounded, gun in hand, protecting his men. One of the intruders raised a weapon aimed directly at him. Without thinking, Lila screamed, "Dante!" Her voice distracted him, just long enough for a bullet to graze his shoulder. He stumbled but shot back with lethal precision, dropping the attacker. His men overpowered the rest, but Dante collapsed, blood soaking his sleeve. Lila rushed to him, kneeling beside his trembling body. "You're hurt. Oh God." He grabbed her wrist weakly, eyes half-lidded but still fierce. "Why didn't you listen?" Tears streamed down her face. "Because I can't just stand by and do nothing." His grip loosened. "You've always been like that." Her breath hitched. "What do you mean?" Dante's voice dropped to a whisper, fading between pain and memory. "The bakery, the little girl who gave a starving boy bread. You don't remember me, Lila, but I never forgot you." Shock rippled through her. You were that boy?" He tried to smile, but darkness claimed him before he could answer. Lila screamed for help, clutching him as his blood stained her hands. For the first time she saw past the cold exterior, the cruel Mafia Boss, and glimpsed the wounded soul he'd hidden for years. As medics rushed him inside, Lila realized the truth that broke her heart wide open. The man she feared most had once loved her first. Dante's recovery was slow, his body strong but his silence even stronger. Days passed as Lila sat by his bedside, replaying his words over and over. The boy with the loaf of bread, the one she had pitied as a child. She had forgotten that small act of kindness, but for him, it had changed everything. One afternoon, while Dante slept, Lila overheard his men speaking outside the door. "The Moreno debt wasn't real," one whispered. "That loan was fabricated by Rafael Moretti. He wanted to trap Valente into marrying the girl, to weaken him through her." The words hit her like a blade. Rage and disbelief surged through her veins. She stormed out, slamming the door open. "Is that true?" she demanded. Dante's eyes opened instantly. The calm she once admired was gone, replaced by guilt. "Lila, listen. You lied to me," she shouted, voice breaking. "You let me believe I sold myself to save my mother when there was no debt at all?" Dante sat up slowly, grimacing from pain. "I didn't know at first. When I found out, it was already too late. Moretti would have killed you if I hadn't claimed you." "Claimed me?" she repeated, tears burning her eyes. "I'm not something you own." He stood, despite the blood seeping through his bandages. "You think I wanted this?" he said, voice trembling. "I did it to keep you safe. The moment I saw your name, I couldn't let them touch you." Lila shook her head, torn between anger and aching tenderness. "You could have told me the truth." "I was afraid," he whispered. "Afraid you'd hate me for what I've become. That the girl who gave me kindness when I had nothing, would see the monster I am now." Silence stretched between them, filled with everything they couldn't say. Then, without warning, Lila stepped forward and touched his face. "You're not a monster, Dante. You just forgot how to be human." For the first time he didn't flinch away. He let her in. That night, the walls of ice between them melted, not completely but enough for warmth to seep through. And when dawn came, they were no longer strangers bound by a deal, but two broken hearts finding their way back to love. Peace in the Valente mansion never lasted long. The night after their confession, a rare calm settled over the house, until a single phone call shattered it. Dante's expression darkened as he listened to his guard's frantic report. "The warehouse burned?" He grabbed his coat, ignoring Lila's pleading voice. Stay here, Lila. Don't open that door for anyone. Hours passed. Rain lashed against the windows, thunder echoing her worry. Then the power went out. The halls went black. Lila lit a candle, whispering his name into the silence, until a hand clamped over her mouth. Don't scream, sweetheart, a cold voice murmured behind her. Camilla. Lila's heart pounded. What do you want? She gasped when released. Camilla's red lips curled into a cruel smile. Justice. You took everything from me, the position, the respect, him. But don't worry. You'll pay the same way your father did. Before Lila could run, 2 masked men seized her. The candle fell, its flames snuffed out. Meanwhile, Dante stormed back into the mansion, drenched in rain and fury. Where's my wife? He barked, scanning the terrified faces of his guards. No one answered, until one handed him a phone. A message glowed on the screen. If you want her alive, come alone. Rage and terror collided inside him. Without hesitation, Dante armed himself and drove into the night. The address led to an abandoned shipping yard, the same place where his father had been betrayed years ago. Lila was tied to a chair, her face pale but defiant. Dante, don't! She screamed as Camilla stepped out of the shadows, pistol in hand. You can't save everyone you love, Camilla sneered. You couldn't save your father. You won't save her. Dante's voice was low, deadly. You should have left her out of this. Gunfire exploded. The world became chaos. Dante's men arrived too late. It was over in seconds. Camilla fell, rage frozen in her eyes. Dante rushed to Lila, cutting her free, his voice breaking. I thought I lost you. She clung to him, trembling. You almost did. And in that moment, blood, smoke and rain swirling around them, they realized love wasn't their weakness. It was their survival. The aftermath was chaos. Sirens echoed in the distance, smoke still rising from the docks. Dante held Lila in his arms, refusing to let go as his men swarmed the scene. But beneath his calm exterior, something inside him broke. Camilla's betrayal had shattered what little humanity he had left. He had lost too much. His father, his peace, and now almost her. The Mafia world demanded blood for blood, and Dante was ready to burn it all down. Days later, the Valente Empire trembled. Dante unleashed vengeance on every traitor who had sided with Moretti. Warehouses exploded. Alliances crumbled. The name Dante Valente became legend and warning in the same breath. But while the city feared him, Lila watched the man she loved disappear behind the cruelty that once defined him. Dante, stop, she begged one night, grabbing his arm as he loaded another gun. You've already won. Don't lose yourself in revenge. He didn't look at her. They tried to take you from me, Lila. They'll all pay for it. Her eyes filled with tears. And when it's over, who'll be left to love you? That question froze him. For a long time, there was silence between them, until Dante dropped the gun, his shoulders trembling. I wanted to be the man you remembered, but I became the monster you feared. She stepped closer, touching his scarred hand. Then stop running from the boy I once knew. He's still in there, Dante. I've seen him. The words broke through his armor like light through glass. For the first time in years, Dante cried, not as a boss but as a man who'd carried too much pain. Hours later, the police sirens blared again, but this time it wasn't his doing. Moretti's men launched one final ambush on the estate. Dante shielded Lila, taking a bullet meant for her. As he collapsed, blood seeping through his shirt, he whispered, if I don't make it, promise me you'll live free. Don't chain yourself to my sins. Lila pressed her forehead to his. You're not dying on me, Dante Valente. Not after finally finding your heart. And as the night faded, the cruel Mafia boss, the man the world feared, finally fell, but not in defeat. He fell for love. The world outside the hospital was chaos, but inside Dante's room, time stood still. Machines beeped softly, their rhythm the only thing keeping Lila's hope alive. She hadn't left his side in 3 days, her fingers always curled around his, afraid that if she let go, he'd slip away forever. Doctors said it was a miracle he'd survived the gunshot. But Lila didn't believe in miracles. She believed in Dante's will, the same stubborn fire that had built an empire and protected her when no one else could. When he finally stirred, his voice was hoarse. You're still here. She smiled through her tears. Where else would I be? He tried to sit up, wincing. I told you to run. And I told you I wouldn't, she said softly. You saved my mother. You saved me. You don't get to push me away again. For a long moment he just looked at her, really looked at her, and all the walls he'd built came crashing down. I spent my life believing love was weakness, he murmured. But you made me see it's the only thing that ever made me strong. She reached out, brushing his cheek. Then don't waste it. Don't let the world turn you cold again. Weeks passed. Dante recovered, slower than before but steadier, calmer. The mansion that once echoed with commands and fear now felt different, alive. Lila brought laughter back into its marble halls, sunlight into its shadows. One evening, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the city, Dante slipped his arm around her waist. The debt's gone, he said quietly. Lila smiled, leaning against him. It was never about money, Dante. He turned to her, eyes soft. Then tell me, what do I owe you now? She smiled up at him. A lifetime. Dante kissed her then, gently, reverently, as if afraid she might fade like a dream. For the first time there was no cruelty, no power, no fear. Only love. And in that moment, under the golden glow of the setting sun, the cruel Mafia boss finally found redemption, not in vengeance, but in the woman who had unknowingly owned his heart all along.